Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, we're another day closer to the Peach Bowl, which means we're also another day closer to Christmas and all the other stuff that happens with Christmas and needing to pack up and abandon our families for about a week to go cover the Peach Bowl. So, yeah, if you're aware of another like 3 to 4 hours I can add into each day between now and the time we depart for the Peach Bowl, that would be tremendously helpful. Thank you.
I was talking to our buddy Spencer Holbrook from Letterman Row the other day, and he's like, so when are you leaving? And I'm like, well, I'm going to leave Christmas morning. He's like, wow, your family doesn't love you, do they? So, yeah. But, I mean, that's part of the job. I mean, did it hurt when he said that? Of course. Did the realization come flooding down? Of course. But also, you know, where else would you rather spend it than by yourself?
Driving to Atlanta. Yes, it is.
Yeah. And hoping that, please, let there be a gas station open so that I can both fill up the car and find dinner. So it's going to be great.
Yeah, it should be one of the more magical Christmases you've seen. Hey, listen, maybe it'll be a white Christmas. It'll be snowing during the drive. You know, hey, you can always hope. You can always hope.
Oh, don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
This is one of those things. Wow, I wish I had your job. Like, sometimes you do. Not always. Sometimes you do.
You think that, and then you have to deal with the backlash of the schedule. And, it is what it is.
Anyway, you also have to deal with questions from our wonderful listeners, which are a delight and which you guys provided in incredible volume. And we are finally going to finish with, I think this is our 4th episode of listener questions. So we'll dig into, we've got 5 more we'll get to on this show. First one from @Ramy Mora. How much of a concern is it that none of the backup quarterbacks got meaningful snaps this year? I
think we saw CJ Stroud prove that it's not necessary. Is it beneficial? Sure. But, he got a handful of snaps in 2020 and then came out and was a Heisman finalist 2 years in a row and 2 of the best seasons in Ohio State history. Now, do you have to be one of the greatest Ohio State quarterbacks of all time to be able to handle that sort of thing? Maybe. I think the good news is that Kyle McCord has already a start under his belt last year as a true freshman. It would have been much better to get him more snaps, and at this point, Devin Brown, I mean, he got a handful more snaps than Quinn Ewers got in 2021, to give you an idea of how little he was on the field. But I don't think it matters, Tom, because Lincoln Kienholz is coming in, and he is going to take over this job. And he ran for 1,500 yards in high school. So what does that project? South Dakota high school. We know there's Texas high school football, there's Florida high school football, there's South Dakota high school football. Whichever you think is the best, they're all right in there. So you can plug 1,500 yards rushing in South Dakota, probably 750 as a freshman in college, throwing for 4,000 yards or whatever in South Dakota. That's 3,200 yards in the Big Ten. So I'm saying almost 4,000 yards of total offense next year for Lincoln Kienholz.
It sounds about right. Like, this is South Dakota high school football to the Big Ten. Seems like the opposite of those, like, hypotheticals, like what would Mike Trout hit in the Pecos League, which is like the lowest league of independent football. And, you run the numbers and it's like it hit 700 with 115 home runs in a season. And yeah, I'm going to guess that Lincoln Kienholz is not going to be an immediate superstar at Ohio State, with 2 5-star quarterbacks ahead of him, and that's okay. To me, I think the issue with not having guys having meaningful snaps this year, not having Kyle McCord and not having Devin Brown have meaningful snaps this year, is less so for 2023 and more so for, hey, remember when Justin Fields got a helmet to the kidney in the Sugar Bowl against Clemson? And they put CJ Stroud in, and it was like, oh, Lord, this kid has literally not thrown a pass all year. If he has to play out the rest of this game, this is going to be a big problem. It feels like this, if CJ Stroud gets a helmet to the kidney in the Peach Bowl, and you have to put Kyle McCord in against the Georgia defense, how prepared is Kyle McCord to face the Georgia defense? We don't know. We haven't really seen Kyle McCord play a meaningful snap this season. That's where I think you really have an issue. And, all season I've kind of had issues with how Ryan Day has managed those snaps and thought that you needed to get those younger guys in a little earlier. And, I think he got Kyle McCord one drive or two drives with the first team offensive line in maybe like the Indiana game or something like that. But he's really not played a lot and has not played, it's been a lot of check down and a lot of handoff and that kind of stuff. So I don't know that Kyle McCord is really prepared to be the next man up if that is what it comes to in the Peach Bowl. As for 2023, there was definitely a learning curve for CJ Stroud in 21. He did not look the same week 1 as he did week 6, week 7, week 8. Part of that was, I think, the shoulder, but part of that also was just sort of getting comfortable running the offense. And so, whoever it is certainly will have the talent and will have the talent around them to succeed next year. I don't really think that's an issue. To me, that's more of a short-term concern than a long-term concern, I think.
And we will obviously spend much more time talking about what's going to happen during the spring, but I expect Kyle McCord, Devin Brown to split those spring reps evenly, and then at some point in fall camp, you hand it over to the starter. But just, you're talking about the injury, so I went back and looked, because one of the most famous is Dwayne Haskins coming off the bench in 2017 against Michigan. He had 50 pass attempts prior to coming into that game against Michigan. That season in 2017, he threw the ball 50 times. This season, Kyle McCord has thrown it 20. Last season, McCord threw it 38, and that's with a start. So McCord has thrown it 58 times in his career. And again, we could probably look to see what Cardale Jones had thrown prior to the 2014 Michigan game, but he didn't really throw the ball in that game, so you don't really need to worry about it too much there. But I doubt he had 50 pass attempts, and we can look in 2014 before the playoffs, before the postseason started there, because he was much more of a runner for Urban Meyer, and I'm just looking. So he threw the ball 92 times that season. He threw the ball 3 times against Michigan. He'd thrown the ball 14 times before the Michigan game in 2014. And but obviously you needed him to do much more than that in the playoffs and the postseason. But I think it's an interesting point, the lack of throws this year for Kyle McCord and what it could mean if he has to go into a game. I think the bigger concern, Tom, is how much will he run it? Because that is really what we're focused on here, is a running quarterback. But no, I think there's going to be plenty of time to get them ramped up for next season. But yeah, obviously the concern this season, and that's Tom, that's why you don't want CJ Stroud running the ball.
Well, Tony, someone has to run the ball, and it can't be the running backs, because the next question from at Chandler with 3 N's, at Chandler 96. Why has the running back room regressed in gap vision this year? Do you think the running back room has regressed in gap vision this year?
I think the running back room has maybe regressed in gap capability and gap cutting because of injuries to knees and feet. So you're kind of maybe looking for an easier road, and the you don't necessarily need to cut it as you get further outside, because you can kind of round things and you don't need to plant necessarily. And so maybe that's one of the things, it's pain avoidance with the injuries and not being effective with the gaps, and like you're stretching things out and then you're looking for the 4-year gap. And so maybe it's not necessarily the vision, although there's definitely been some, I don't know that the vision issues weren't there to start the season. I haven't seen examples of that, but when you see, when things are going poorly, everybody looks for every example, and it's like, well, look at this big hole that was missed. But if things are going well, do you necessarily look for the big holes that were missed? Because I don't think that the vision issues just started. I think there tends to be some, it's going to hurt if I do that sort of thing, or I'm not equipped to do that right now, so I'm going to just see what else is out here, that sort of thing. It
does feel like you haven't seen guys. They've been a little bit off in a lot of different ways this year, and it's been some of the vision and Travion Henderson has been gotten dogged for bouncing stuff outside a bunch this year, and maybe that is just a function of the injuries and not being able to stick your foot in the field and go north and south. I guess we'll see. Is the I feel like it hasn't necessarily been as much of an issue with Mayan Williams as it has with Henderson, and we'll see if Williams is if some of those issues are corrected for the Peach Bowl with Williams. We'll also see how many gaps there are for Williams to see and cut up through against that Georgia defensive front. But yeah, I'm willing to show a certain amount of grace, because guys who have shown in the past they can do it, if the fact that they're hurt this year, that feels like, if that's a plausible explanation, I'm sort of willing to assume that that's what at least the key issue is there, rather than like they've just forgotten how to do it. The fact that the injuries are right there, that seems like at least the most plausible to me answer, rather than just like they've forgotten how to do this stuff. So next one from at JJGO Law Group. How did Michigan get so awesome? Well, Tony, I think to me, the answer here is that they have kind of zagged while everyone else is zigging. The whole sport is going one way, and Michigan's kind of going the other. And what they've done is they have, while the whole sport is kind of going spread and, spread everyone out, they've been a little bit more. This is not like they're running the Maryland eye every play, but they have really focused on the lines, and they have established a really good running game. They've got some really good running backs. They're a much more run heavy team than most of the other teams at the top of the sport right now. And that, when the whole sport is geared up to defend the other, what everyone else is doing, this is why the triple option works, because you're doing something so different from what everyone else is doing that everyone else is built to defend one thing, and then you're throwing something completely different at them. I think that works to a certain point. And I think the point that stops working is what Michigan does is also something that when you run into a Georgia type defense, they can just sort of out athlete you and can stop what you want to do. I mean, remember last year, Michigan's offensive line walked into the Orange Bowl wearing T-shirts that said "Run the damn ball," and then guess what? They did not do against the Georgia defense, because the Georgia defense was simply too big and fast and strong. They did not run the damn ball. So I think it's just Jim Harbaugh has sort of zagged while everyone else is zigging, and that's at least one of the facets of it. But what do you think?
I think there is some taking advantage of a weak Big Ten right now, and Ohio State has done that for decades at this point, and so there is some of that. But yeah, it's the familiarity or lack of familiarity. You're dealing with 13 personnel, 12 personnel constantly, and you have to change what you do. Everybody's doing the 4-2-5s or 3-3-5. Everybody's got this nickel defense that is their base defense. And now how do you deal with the power running? And also, it's not just scheme. They've got some talented players. Like Blake Corum is the best running back that I saw in college football this year. And you have one of the top 3 offensive lines that's going to make him even better. You've got a quarterback that can escape, but really they didn't rely on him too much. They just win the surest way. Special teams. I have one of the best special teams in the nation. Not any really return game to speak of, but in terms of kicking the ball, they do it very well. They're sound there. They've got good defensive scheme. And he's made 2 good defensive coordinator hires in a row, and they're just safer than they were under Don Brown, that's for sure. So they're not hurting themselves. I think that's also a big thing. When you're going to be that conservative thing, the one thing you can't do is hurt yourself and give up some free points or some free plays, and that was something that Don Brown, brought there. And so and we've seen that with Ohio State with Jim Knowles against Michigan. And no, I don't believe that Jim Knowles is Ohio State's Don Brown. I don't think you could say that after one game. You could say that after 4 games, 4 Michigan games or whatever. But I think that, not being tested overly all that much week to week in the Big Ten, I do wonder what they would have done in the SEC. Are they 10-2? And instead of 12-0? Are they? Does somebody get them? Does somebody push them too much? Because I just don't think you don't get pushed enough in the Big Ten. And I would say that for Ohio State. I have said that for Ohio State. And when the three best teams, the good thing about Ohio State, Michigan State, or Michigan and Penn State, like they play each other every year, so you do get that test. You can't avoid that. So there, you do get to test yourself that way, and you do get a little bit prepared, but you don't see it week in and week out. And I think they're making the most of it right now. I still don't think they should beat TCU, obviously, but I still don't think they're equipped to beat Georgia because I don't think they have the explosion.
Yeah, and that I think is, when the playoff field got announced, I was anticipating they were going to rematch Ohio State and Michigan because very clearly TCU is the fourth best team in the field this year, and you would want to give the number one team the fourth best team. Right now, the number one team is a smaller favorite against the fourth team in the field, as compared to the second team versus the third team. The third team, or the fourth team in the field, would be a favorite over the third team in a neutral field. That tells you did not put the teams in the right order. So yes, I do think Michigan is going to get through TCU. They might get through TCU without a whole heck of a lot of trouble because I think this is a better, more balanced team than Sonny Dykes is used to facing, and I think a lot of the stuff that they did against Ohio State should work against Max Duggan as well. He's more of a runner than CJ Stroud is, but he's not as much of a passer. And I think that Michigan gets through TCU, but yeah, I think you also are going to run into an issue against Georgia where Georgia is going to be able to do enough stuff to really stress that Michigan offense that I don't know that would be a good matchup for them if that's who they end up playing in the national championship game. I mean, you just did a poll on Michigan fans. Are you rooting for Ohio State? And Ohio State fans, are you rooting for Michigan? And a whole lot more Michigan fans were rooting for Ohio State to win the semifinal than Ohio State fans were rooting for Michigan. So I think everyone sort of knows what I'm saying there is probably largely true. All right, next one from at 1967 Sevi. Are there any specific defensive backs getting healthy that will be able to shore up our defense? And I don't know if you talked to Cam Brown, but Cam Brown has been more or less healthy this year. I think he's certainly one of the big pieces there. When we did interviews on Tuesday, I was there for Jordan Hancock on Tuesday. Jordan Hancock sure sounds like he is feeling a lot better and is really getting up to speed. And, we've talked before about who they bring out for interviews is generally somewhat instructive in terms of who they view as, significant players for the game and guys who are going to be healthy for the game and all that kind of stuff. We saw Jordan Hancock. I don't think we saw Denzel Burke or J.K. Johnson. So that to me, to address the specific question, are there any specific defensive backs getting healthy that will be able to help shore up the defense? Tony, to me, I take the answer there to be Jordan Hancock might be the answer there.
Well, that would help. And I'm just looking through, got the snap counts from Dan Hope at 11 Warriors. Denzel Burke missed the Indiana game, and then he's played the last two. Cameron Brown has missed 5 games this season, but has played the last 3. Jordan Hancock, 8 snaps against Maryland, only special teams against Michigan, which tells you he's not been healthy. So he would seem to be getting healthier at this point. And so if you can have your top 3 guys, and then if J.K. Johnson, whatever, if you can have your top 3 corners healthy, that would be fantastic. Safeties are okay. Lathan Ransom, Ronnie Hickman, Tanner McAllister have been playing nonstop, other than when they go heavy and Tanner McAllister comes out. Josh Proctor is available, so that helps as well. We know Cam Martinez is available because we saw him on the field against Michigan. So it would seem like everybody is getting healthier in the secondary at this point. Now, will their necks allow them to turn back and look for the ball? I don't know. I don't know the health of that aspect of it just yet. But yeah, and specifically, I think everybody is using this time wisely and not just helping, not just the defensive backs, but the pass defense will be helped by a healthier Mike Hall, who says he's going to be 100%. And it was odd to me. They said he's been feeling like 100% since the Maryland game, but his snaps really, have they really gone up that much? He doesn't, 13-13 against Maryland and Michigan. So no, they haven't been going up. They need to go up, I think, at this point. And Ty Hamilton, I know, they like the way he's stopping the run. Georgia likes to throw the ball. And it was interesting to hear all of the questions. There's so many questions yesterday about how Georgia likes to pound the ball and pound the ball and pound the ball. And I'm thinking, you guys haven't watched Georgia, have you?
Yeah, this is a game that feels like if Ohio State, I don't anticipate Georgia running for 250 yards against Ohio State. It feels like if Georgia's going to beat Ohio State, they're going to do it with a bunch of passes to, Brock Bowers or Kenny McIntosh out of the backfield or Ladd McConkey, and then, someone misses a tackle and then the swing pass turns into a 50-yard touchdown. Like that. That's the stuff that I think if I'm Ohio State defense, that's what I'm worried most about stopping. Because Georgia's offense we've watched a bunch of Georgia games where it's just, that they'll run. What was the last one we watched? Tennessee. They ran the ball 3 times for like 10 yards, 15 yards in the first quarter of that game. And it was like, wow, how many yards did they finish rushing in this game? And it was like 130. It was like, what? I just saw like a third of your offense in 3 plays. What's going on? Yeah, I think this is a Mike Hall game much more than a Ty Hamilton game. And Mike Hall was, he talked about the fact he got hurt in the Wisconsin game, which is way back in September, and was playing at kind of 80-85% for a lot of the year. And now, after playing 10 snaps a game and kind of really sort of managing that number of snaps, now it's a challenge to sort of get up to speed and up to, build up that stamina again to be ready to play 30, 40 snaps against Georgia. Because I think that's what they're envisioning. That's what he's working towards right now. And, that's I think what they're going to ultimately need out of him. Because we have seen Stetson Bennett stand in the pocket without anyone coming at him. And that is not something Ohio State wants. And we have seen Stetson Bennett kind of get guys in his face, and even if he's kind of running, moving off his spot, sometimes that will just be enough to throw the timing off on plays, get them a little disjointed on offense. We watched the Missouri game. That was very much Missouri's game plan was the defensive line just kind of got them off their game, and they just looked off the whole game. That's what Ohio State's going to have to do to limit that Georgia offense. And this is. Why did Ohio State's secondary get so much worse from 2019 to 2020? Well, part of it was Jeff Okudah and Jordan Fuller left, but also a big part of it was Chase Young left. And if you can get that kind of a Chase Young type disruptor in the backfield, whether it's Mike Hall, whether it's JT Tuimoloau, whether it's someone else, that can help that pass defense quite a bit as well. All right, and our final one from @Brezak12. How do we actually make fruitful adjustments in the second half? Do we not see the other team's tendencies by the third quarter, or just fail to communicate to the adjustments needed?
Tom, I'm going to assume this is in reference to Michigan, but I would argue, what adjustments did you need to make in the second half of that game? And I'll tell you why I say that. Michigan had 214 yards of total offense in the first half. 144 of that came on 2 plays. So they had 70 yards of offense that wasn't attached to a 69-yard touchdown and a 75-yard touchdown. The adjustment is to make those tackles and to make that coverage. And so that's not really something you adjust to. That's something you're supposed to do. And so they finished with like 530 yards of total offense. 316 of that came in the second half. So I think the problem was, and there was nothing to adjust to because Michigan doesn't change what they do. It's not like Michigan changed things. What they've done all season, they just continue to do what they do. And eventually it works. They wear you out. And I don't know that they wore Ohio State out. Obviously, Ohio State gave up there at the end. But the big plays is the thing. It's like it wasn't anything scheme-wise, or although the second half adjustments, I guess, would be like, you don't need to be that aggressive against this offense. But based on what they did in the first half, there is no reason to change what you're doing. You just need to, if Cam Brown makes a tackle, then you don't have that 69-yard or whatever. And then you just have one play. And I'm saying, if you just take this away and you just take that away. No, I'm saying, if you just make the tackle, the scheme was there, the calls were there, the execution was not. So based on that first half, I don't necessarily know that there was a drastic need for any adjustments. The adjustments could have been made in the second half based on what was going on in the second half. I think you didn't necessarily need to be so aggressive, but some will argue the aggression is what held them to the 1 yard rushing in the first half and the 90 yards rushing through the first 30 carries that they had.
And, I think people right now may be yelling at their phones, well, what about the other side of the ball? And yes, the other side of the ball did have some issues in that second half, no question. Third quarter offense for Ohio State, they had 5 rushes for 13 yards and 3 passes for 3 completions for 34 yards, and that was it. It was not a terribly inefficient offense necessarily. It was just they had a drive. They got down across midfield to a 2nd and 2 at the 50, and then a 3rd and 3 at the 49, and then a 4th and 3 at the 49. And they ran shotgun. It was the first down was Chip Trainum runs for 8 yards. Second down runs for a 1 yard loss. Third down runs for 0 yards. And then they punted on 4th and 3 at the 49, which, there's some question. I think I would have some questions there about the decision making there. The next drive was the one where they got down to the Michigan 43 and punted on 4th and 5. I think there is an argument there that the issue is not necessarily Ohio State, Michigan making adjustments to what Ohio State was doing, and it was just Ohio State didn't take advantage of the opportunities they have. If you have the ball on the plus side of the 50 twice in 2 drives, it's right there for the taking, and you're playing it too conservatively. And I guess to a certain point, you look at all the Michigan lack of production in the first half that you just talked about there, and you kind of assume that they will not be able to continue. Like you're not going to rely on hitting a bunch of crazy long plays. That's not necessarily generally as sustainable as, sort of being an efficient offense, staying on schedule, moving down the field. So I kind of get it, but also this is something that Ryan Day has done repeatedly in big games. And so, at some point you've got to sort of change things up, and we'll see if he does that against Georgia in the Peach Bowl. But, I don't know that I necessarily chalk that up to adjustments necessarily. It's more, if you can't pick up 2 yards on 2nd and 2 or 3 yards on 3rd and 3, I feel like maybe you should be doing something else there. And that's not necessarily adjustments. That's just sort of like play calling mix. And if you're not running the ball effectively, then there is another option with your offense, and you should maybe be just, maybe you throw the ball more to Marvin Harrison. I don't know. I'm just a caveman.
Well, and I would also say that even with talking Ohio State's offense, they had 315 yards of total offense in the first half. What's to adjust? They scored 20 points. What's to adjust? Just do that again. Do the exact same thing again. But they got away from the run a little bit, and so they did. I guess it was not a fruitful adjustment. It was a fruitless adjustment. And I think that first half went such, both sides of the ball, it's like, well, if we just do this again, we win. Like, all of the math is there. Like, yes, you could say Michigan's not going to be held to 1 yard rushing in the second half. I think we agree there. But also, well, if you put 315 yards up in the first half and only score 20, you do that again in the second half, points are going to come. So the idea of, well, this is inevitable, but this isn't, when both of those things, if you do 300 yards in the first half and you expect to do 300 yards in the second half, if the lowest you get out of that is 40 points, no, it would not have been good enough to win in this game. But I also think if Ohio State scores another 20 points in this one, they don't necessarily give up those last 14 points, So I think there's some give and take there. I don't know that halftime adjustments or second half adjustments is necessarily the issue that was seen in this game.
Well, and the other thing is that second drive I was talking about, where they ended up, this was the one that ended with what should have been the fake punt that wasn't the fake punt, where they come out, they start with the ball on Michigan's 48-yard line, first play complete down the right sideline to Chip Trainum for 24 yards down to the Michigan 24. So Ohio State should have the ball 1st and 10 at the Michigan 24, down 4 points. holding penalty on Donovan Jackson, and that was also the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on G. Scott. So instead of having the ball 1st and 10 at the Michigan 24, you now have it 1st and 35 at your own 27. And, that's not a halftime adjustments thing. That's one guy got called for holding and one guy did something that was like weapons grade stupid. And that, that's not a halftime adjustment issue. And they still almost they almost dug themselves out of a 1st and 35 and a 2nd and 32 because you had a complete pass to Marvin Harrison for 13 yards. You had a complete pass to Chip Traynham for 14 yards, and you got yourself down to a 4th and 5. So, it is, I don't think adjustments are necessarily what I would chalk up the issues to there. It was a bunch of one-off failures. And that's, you can have the conversation about whether that's a coaching issue or not. And I think there's an argument that it's based on the frequency and repetition with which we saw some of those one-off issues. Maybe it is a coaching issue, but I don't think it's an adjustment issue necessarily. That feels like that's sort of a little bit of a narrative thing that people just go, well, okay. And Michigan is a second half team, but Michigan is a second half team, not necessarily just because of adjustments, but because of the way Michigan plays football. If Michigan is in the game or ahead, Michigan is going to wear on you and wear you down. And then you're going to see the big plays at the end of the game. We see this with Ohio State too, that it is, when you have a depth, when you have good depth and when you can wear on the opposing team, that ultimately pays off at the end of the game.
I think I've seen it now. It's a rope-a-dope by Michigan. They fool you into thinking you don't need to make any adjustments because what you're doing in the first half works. Then it's like, haha, we've got you. And then that also answers the third question. How did Michigan get so awesome? They take a lot of punches and they can handle it. And then they do what Sylvester Stallone, Lincoln Hawk did. And over the top, once the second half and the fourth quarter comes around, they turn their hat backwards and they get into another mode, and then they go over the top, Tom. That's what they do.
It's like Homer in the when he's a boxer and just lets you stand there and punch yourself out and then just pushes you over at the end. That's kind of Michigan.
You said that, Tom, not me. But anything else? I think we have defeated all of the listener questions, and I think vanquished them and made ourselves look good in the process. So that's always the best part.
It's really the only thing that matters.
So that will do it. I want to thank you all for joining us. As always, check out BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Say hello to us there in the message board, and love to talk to you there. And also you can find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Tom, I was going to ask who's on the morning show, but we don't exactly know when this show is necessarily. I think this is a Friday show. So I won't even ask. But check out Tom's morning show, Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning, please. And many other podcasts. We've got Mark Givler's Skull Session podcast, which dropped recently. The Jeremiah Smith news. Him and Kevin Noon talked about that. Did you and Mark go and talk about Lincoln Kienholz then as well?
Yes, we talked about Lincoln Kienholz, the commitment from the quarterback. Kevin and Mark talked about the commitment of Jeremiah Smith. We have so that's a Skull Session recruiting podcast. Kevin, of course, does the Noon's Big Me Kickoff podcast. I do Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning, and also we have the College Football Playbook podcast. That is, I believe, coming soon. I don't know if they've done an episode yet. I'm not.
Couple.
They've done a couple. Okay, they've done a couple. So yes, you're gonna want to subscribe to that one as well. And we have the College Football Playbook YouTube channel as well. So that's youtube.com/ and then the @ CFB Playbook. We're building the subscriber base and starting to build that channel. It's more of an off-season thing than anything else, but go ahead and subscribe to it now so that when it does start in the off-season, you're going to want to be a part of that as well. So go ahead and subscribe now, and then you'll start getting notified when we start doing cool stuff over there as well.
Yeah, and that College Football Playbook podcast, Mark Givler and Tyler Shoemaker doing that one. So check that one out. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys later.